I found out my boyfriend proposed to someone else, and he used my money to do it. Yep, you heard that right. My card, my hard-earned cash, and the ring shining on her finger. Want to know how I handled being the accidental sponsor of his engagement party? Grab a snack and let me tell you. People always say life-changing moments usually start with something tiny, like picking the wrong line at Starbucks and accidentally meeting the love of your life. For me, that moment happened in an airport somewhere in Arizona, when the only thing I was sure about was I just wanted to get home, take a hot shower, and crash straight into bed. I'm an event planner. Sounds glamorous, right? Lights, champagne, sparkling backdrops. But the truth is, I'm used to living in deadlines, handling last-minute crises, and faking a smile even when a VIP is yelling in my face. In other words, my job keeps me in permanent emergency response mode. And that airport that day? Yep, it turned into one of those emergencies. My flight got delayed 3 hours. The announcement over the PA sounded like some cruel joke. I slumped into a cold metal chair, pulled out my sad little fast food stash, a lukewarm burger from the food court, and told myself, okay, Lena, at least a burger never cancels on you last minute. Then Dylan showed up. Not in some dramatic, light shining down, angels singing kind of way. He just dropped into the row of seats across from me, set down his beat-up backpack, and stared at my burger like it was the fanciest buffet Phoenix had to offer. You really planning to eat that whole thing by yourself? He grinned. I looked up, ready to roll my eyes, but instead I laughed. Maybe it was exhaustion? Maybe it was the way he said it, but somehow it sounded oddly charming. I tore the burger in half and held out a piece. Here. Eat it before I change my mind. And just like that, we started talking. Dylan said he used to work in advertising at a big agency, but had quit to start his own business. He said that phrase with these sparkling eyes, like he was pitching an indie film fresh off a Sundance win. Mule? As an event planner, I knew all too well that starting your own business often just means temporarily unemployed, but trying to make it sound fancier. Still, I couldn't help but laugh. And honestly, feel a little impressed. He shared some old stories, slipped in a few witty jokes, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person he cared about in the middle of that chaotic airport. You know that feeling when you want to listen, but also roast the other person a little? Yeah, that was the vibe. I remember saying, if you're about to pitch your startup idea here at the airport, I'm getting up and walking away. Dylan burst out laughing, nodding. Don't worry, this airport isn't nearly cool enough to turn into a WeWork. And I thought, okay, maybe this 3-hour delay isn't complete torture after all. If you've ever been stuck waiting for a flight, you'll get it. When a stranger makes you laugh, you almost automatically slap the fate label on them. Honestly, I even caught myself thinking, maybe one day I'll tell people I met my boyfriend at an airport. That's kinda cinematic. Cheesy? Sure. But come on, if you're stuck for 8 hours and some random guy turns out to be cute and funny, wouldn't you think that's at least a little meant to be? Drop a comment. I'm seriously curious. We kept talking until my stomach growled loud enough to remind me that cold fries don't count as a meal. Dylan pulled out some snacks from his backpack, the kind of granola bars I swear only hardcore hikers or minimalist lifestyle guys actually eat. I took a bite, made a face, and joked, this is the kind of food that makes me appreciate burgers twice as much. He cracked up. Over the next few hours, we swapped numbers, promised to survive the next delay together, and talked about everything. Old movies, indie music, even how much he hated office life. I listened, and honestly, it was easier to get pulled into his stories than it was to drag timelines around on my event planning laptop. And then, when the airport speakers announced our flight was boarding, I sat there realizing I was looking at Dylan with this, oh, maybe this is the start of something kind of gaze. I remember thinking, I just met a guy who's artsy, but in a really cute way. I had no idea that meet cute wasn't the start of some rom-com destiny, but actually the trailer for a full-blown drama series where I was about to play the lead role. When that so-called fateful flight ended, I honestly thought Dylan would just be a cute airport story I'd retell at brunch with friends. But nope, he kept texting, inviting me out for dinners, coffee dates, long walks around the city, like we were starring in some indie film shot in Texas. He kept talking about his almost successful startups. One day, it was an app to connect freelance artists. The next, it was an advertising platform that would revolutionize the industry. Sound familiar? Yeah, I thought so too. But Dylan had this gift for making everything sound like it was just one tiny step away from millionaire status. Me, as an event planner, I was used to clients promising things were almost done, so I should have known better. But I'll admit it, I got caught up in those sparkling eyes that basically said, "Trust me, success is just around the corner." 6 months later, Dylan's lease was up. One night, while I was busy tweaking the timeline for an event, he dropped the sweetest little line. "What do you think about us living together? It'll be cheaper, more convenient." The way he said it, like it was the most natural next step in a steady relationship. And me, the girl who plans every tiny detail of other people's lives, didn't have a plan for this big decision. I just nodded yes. Who would have guessed that my cozy 2-bedroom apartment was about to turn into an unlicensed startup office? The first month, Dylan actually surprised me. He paid his share of the rent on time, chipped in for utilities, even cooked a few meals. I thought, okay, maybe I misjudged him. He's actually responsible. But then came month 2, and Dylan started running late. He said a big client was slow to pay, just needed a few more days. I brushed it off. Everyone hits a rough patch sometimes. By month 3, the excuse had shifted to, the contract isn't signed yet, but it should be done next week. By month 4, I'd heard the phrase, the big deal got delayed, so many times that if I had $1 for every mention, I could have paid half the rent myself. Meanwhile, my apartment lights and Wi-Fi were running 24/7 because Dylan was networking online. He bragged about joining endless startup groups, hopping on Zoom calls with potential partners. But every time I walked by, his screen was filled with Reddit, Discord, and the occasional how to pitch like a pro video. He said he was building a network. I looked at the empty fridge and thought, he's building a network and I'm building debt. My best friend, Maya, a teacher with the sharpness of a therapist, caught on fast. One night over drinks, I vented about having to cover the electric bill again because Dylan was busy with a deal. Maya set her glass down, gave me that look teachers reserve for kids who just got caught cheating on a test. "Girl, he's using you like a wallet with a pulse." I laughed, but then I went quiet. Because deep down, I knew Maya was right. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. Hold up. Hearing all this, do you think I was being too easy on him? Maybe you're thinking, girl, you should have kicked him out by month 2. And honestly, I want to know. If it were you, what would you do when the person you're dating slowly morphs into a freeloading roommate? Drop a comment. I need to know if anyone else would have been as naive as I was back then. The truth is, I convinced myself this was just a temporary rough patch. Dylan had this way of talking that made you believe the light at the end of the tunnel was right there. He was smooth with promises. I thought if I just pushed through a little longer, he'd get it together and things would balance out. As an event planner, I was trained to believe every chaotic mess eventually works itself out, like a disorganized event that somehow still ends with applause. But real life isn't like that. With Dylan, the chaos was only just beginning, and I had unknowingly signed up as the official sponsor of his entire startup venture. Here's the real twist. I made myself a co-conspirator in his little game. I believed him, covered for him, and kept labeling it as temporary. But that temporary lasted longer than the biggest event contract I've ever managed. I kept telling myself, it's just temporary, until that so-called temporary turned into Dylan's full-time lifestyle. And those little cracks? They weren't little anymore. It was like a leaky ceiling dripping one more line of water on my head every week. Dylan always claimed he didn't have enough money for his share of the bills, but somehow, he never seemed short on cash for brand new sneakers or the latest limited edition console. I still remember him unboxing a pair of shoes, grinning like he'd just closed a $1 million deal. I stood there wanting to scream. If those sneakers could pay the electric bill, I'd be thrilled too. But instead of screaming, I just sighed. And to make it worse, Dylan always had enough energy to take his buddies out for nights at the bar, ordering fancy cocktails, while I was at home budgeting every grocery run down to the last dollar. Sometimes I wondered, was I unknowingly auditioning for the role of sugar mama? One time I mentioned it to Maya and she shot back instantly. At least sugar mamas get gifts, you're just giving him money. That one stung, but wow, was she right. The biggest irony? Dylan was insanely creative when it came to dodging responsibility. Take the day I casually brought up marriage. I wasn't asking for a proposal, just testing the waters to see if he had any long-term plans in mind. Dylan instantly launched into this monologue. Marriage is just a contract. Real love doesn't need paperwork to prove itself. It sounded so deep and philosophical, but all I wanted to say was, yeah, well, rent is a contract too. Why don't you try telling the landlord love is enough and see how that works out? From that moment, I started realizing Dylan and I weren't walking the same path. But then, just a month later, he suddenly flipped the script. Dylan started showing up at events, dressed sharp, tie, blazer, hair perfectly styled like he was auditioning for the cover of Forbes. He said his work was finally taking off, that he was networking more, that a big opportunity was right around the corner. And I'll admit it, for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. The softer part of me wanted to believe Dylan was finally getting serious, that maybe the sneakers and consoles had just been small rewards at the end of a rough chapter. One night he came home late, still in his suit, grinning from ear to ear. I asked how it went. His answer? Great. Almost there. I didn't know what almost there meant, but I swallowed that hope like a vitamin, praying it would give me enough energy to deal with the mountain of bills waiting on my desk. And then, the real slap didn't come from Dylan. It came from Maya. One night, I was at home reworking a proposal for a picky client when Maya called. Her voice was shaky, caught between anger and pity. Lena, I just saw Dylan at a tech event, but he wasn't alone. My stomach dropped. I pressed her for details. Maya's voice slowed, heavy. He was with a woman. And listen, Lena, he introduced her as his fiancée. Can you imagine that feeling? It's like sitting in a theater, watching what you thought was your love story, only for the camera to suddenly pan to another girl and the screen flashes. Actually, she's the real lead. I froze. Every pair of sneakers, every networking event, every sharp suit, it wasn't for our future. It was all part of the stage set. For someone else. That plot twist hit faster than any deadline I've ever faced, and it laid the truth bare. I wasn't the person Dylan was investing his energy in. I was just the invisible sponsor, sitting in the audience, thinking I was part of the show. I sat frozen after Maya's call. For a second, I convinced myself I must have misheard. But before I could even catch my breath, ting! My phone lit up again. Maya had sent me a link to Instagram. I opened it, and bam! The screen lit up like a champagne commercial. A girl, Haley, 26, working at some PR agency, was beaming under a canopy of glowing string lights. On her hand sparkled a ring the size of the trust I had just lost. The caption, bold and smug, I said yes. I swear, in that moment my heart hit pause while my brain switched straight into WTF mode. Months of me busting my back to cover bills and Dylan was out here using his so-called startup hustle to fund a romantic proposal script for someone else? And you'd think I cried, right? Nope. I laughed. The kind of unhinged laugh main characters in thrillers let out right before they do something reckless. But instead of going off the rails, I did the sensible thing. I checked my bank account. And that's when the joke morphed into a full-blown nightmare. Right there on my statement were two glowing charges. $3,200 at a downtown jewelry store, plus a fancy 3-night hotel stay over the weekend. I don't know if Haley thought it was romantic, but me? I realized I had just paid for the season premiere of Keeping Up with Dylan the Freeloader. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to swallow the wave of humiliation rising in my chest. And the funny part, I'd spent months telling myself, it's just a rough patch. Ha! Rough patch for me, not for Dylan. He was living like a king while I'd been downgraded to a walking credit card. That night, Dylan came home, looking as carefree as if he'd just been out grabbing craft beers with his buddies. I was standing right at the door, hands shaking, but my voice steady as stone. Did you use my money to buy an engagement ring for someone else? Dylan froze for half a second, then shrugged, his face completely calm. You're overthinking. Haley isn't like you. You're not the kind of woman men marry. You're just someone to lean on for a while. Boom. That sentence stabbed me straight in the chest like a velvet-wrapped knife. I wanted to believe I misheard, but Dylan's indifferent eyes made it clear. Nope, I heard him right. He truly believed I was only good enough to be a cushion to lean on, while the glory was meant for someone else. In that moment, I wasn't even angry anymore. It was like I flipped into spring cleaning mode on steroids. In 10 minutes flat, I grabbed Dylan's backpack, sneakers, and a pile of wrinkled hoodies and hurled them out into the hallway. The crash echoed like the laugh track to a terrible sitcom finale. Dylan just stood there, raised an eyebrow, and casually walked off without picking up a single thing. I slammed the door shut, leaned back against the wall, my heart racing. For a second, I thought I'd won. But as the night dragged on, his words, "You're not the kind of woman men marry," kept looping in my head like a broken record. I tossed and turned, watching the clock crawl past 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and still, sleep wouldn't come. Have you ever heard a sentence that haunts you so much it turns into a ringtone in your brain? That was me, and I knew. Those sleepless nights were only just beginning. After a few nights of replaying his knife-in-the-heart words, I finally decided to dig deeper into my accounts. And oh my God, I wish I hadn't. That $3,200 ring? Just the opening act. Once I added up all the little charges I'd brushed off as Starbucks runs or Uber rides, the total came to almost $6,500 drained in just a few months. My money, my hard work, and Dylan had funneled it into sneakers, cocktails, and that shiny ring for his brand new fiancée. I practically sprinted to call the bank, thinking surely they'd take my side. But after a quick check, the rep came back with the flattest voice. "Sorry, but he's an authorized user. That means all transactions are valid. We can't issue a refund." I wanted to slam the phone into the desk. Just like that, my boyfriend had leveled up to a licensed thief. Stress piled up, and I started slipping at work. Deadlines got missed, events I managed ran into hiccups, and soon my boss called me in for a serious talk. A month later, the dreaded email hit my inbox. "We regret to inform you due to staff reductions." And just like that, from event planner, I became the main event of my own life. Unemployed and broke. Have you ever tried juggling heartbreak, unemployment, and a stack of bills taller than your stilettos? It's like the 3-layer hell combo, but without the free soda on the side. I ended up selling almost half my closet on eBay. And the part that hurt the most? Letting go of the red dress I wore on my very first date with Dylan. Yep, the dress I once thought marked the start of love. Turns out it was just Exhibit A in a case of love and money fraud. Worse, there were days I had to swallow my pride and line up at the food bank for a box of groceries. Standing there among strangers, I forced a smile as they handed me pasta and canned beans. Me, the girl who used to plan events with champagne and finger foods, was now debating whether dinner should be macaroni or bean soup. The universe really has a twisted sense of humor. But the biggest slap wasn't even about the money. One day, by chance, I stumbled across an old group chat of Dylan's with his buddies. They were sharing Haley's proposal video, spamming it with reaction emojis. Some even commented, "Finally, he found the right one." So yeah, turns out I wasn't just the ATM with a heartbeat. I was also the public punchline in Dylan's friend circle. Everyone knew he had upgraded. Everyone but me, the fool clutching onto a shredded relationship, mistaking it for something precious. In that moment, I laughed. A bitter, hollow laugh straight out of a bad sitcom. I used to think the biggest shock of my life was losing Dylan. But no, the real shock was realizing I'd only ever been a side character in a show Dylan's entire world had been watching long before me. I was the last audience member to find out, and the only one who had to pay for a ticket. Once I accepted I'd been the collective punchline in Dylan's circus, reality came crashing back. The bills were still piled high on the table. I needed money, fast, so I took a temp job at a warehouse on the edge of town. And let me tell you, if you think being an event planner means tough deadlines, try hauling boxes heavy as regret for 8 hours straight. After 3 days, I'd officially rebranded from Queen of Romantic Setups to Exhausted Human Forklift. At that point, my body felt like an old phone, battery draining fast, always flashing low power mode. One afternoon, after a shift that felt longer than a CVS receipt, I dragged myself to the bus stop, barely sat down before my vision went dark and blackout. When I opened my eyes, I saw a face both unfamiliar and sitcom familiar. Riley, the warehouse supervisor. She was 34, hair tied back, eyes equal parts tough and kind. And thank God, she didn't leave me there like a defective box. Riley pulled me off the bus stop and brought me to her small apartment. I came to on her couch, a glass of orange juice sitting beside me. Instead of judging, Riley just smirked and said, "Girl, you look exactly like me at 28, back when I was dumb enough to believe my ex-husband would grow up." I let out this dry laugh. Turns out, Heartbreak has a hometown reunion club. That night, over frozen pizza, we swapped life stories. Riley told me how her ex once signed loans under her name and then disappeared, leaving her to carry the weight alone while raising their 5-year-old son. Her story felt like the previous season of mine. The difference was, she'd survived it, and was still standing strong. In the days that followed, we became exhausted allies. Working side by side, Riley always had a joke to keep me from collapsing. "Hey, at least this box won't ghost you after 3 months of dating." I laughed so hard my stomach hurt, lugging cartons but somehow not feeling so alone anymore. One evening after a shift, with the sky as gray as my mood, Riley sat next to me and said, seriously, "Listen, Lena, you didn't lose Dylan. You just got rid of a parasite." That line hit me like someone flipping on the light in a dark room. I sat there stunned for a few seconds, then laughed through tears. She was right. This whole time I'd been treating myself like a victim of loss. But if Dylan was just a leech, then him disappearing wasn't a tragedy. It was a blessing. You know that feeling when you suddenly realize what you thought was a loss was actually dead weight? It's like finding $20 in an old pair of jeans. It doesn't solve all your debt, but it makes the day a whole lot lighter. And thanks to Riley, for the first time in months, I felt my chest loosen, like a boulder had finally rolled off my heart. Who would have guessed the light at the end of my disaster tunnel would show up in a dusty warehouse, and in the form of another woman who'd also been swiped like a living credit card by love. Bookmark. After Riley's parasite comment, I started seeing things lighter, not because the debt vanished, but because I knew I wasn't chained to the swamp called Dylan anymore. So when he suddenly came back, I didn't crumble. I just found it laughable. One Sunday afternoon, I heard a knock on the door, opened it, and there was Dylan, looking like the clearance sale version of himself. Wrinkled clothes, scruffy beard, holding a sad little grocery store bouquet that probably cost less than the frozen pizza baking in my oven. In his other hand, a cheap silver ring that sparkled like a Black Friday markdown. "Lena, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I realize you're the only one who truly loves me," he stammered, voice trembling like he was auditioning for some second-rate soap opera. If this had been me a few months earlier, I probably would have burst into tears. But now? I just looked at Dylan and laughed. Laughed so hard he actually looked confused. Then I said, "Wrong address. This is the home of a woman who's not stupid anymore." I shut the door in his face, hearing the sad crinkle of grocery store flowers hitting the hallway floor. And for the first time, my heart wasn't pounding from pain. It was pounding from relief. After that clown show, I threw myself into job applications. Every day I camped out at the library, cranking out cover letters and tweaking my resume like I was prepping a dating profile. A month later, I landed a job at an event agency in downtown Austin, paycheck even bigger than my old gig. I was officially back. But this version of me came with parasite-proof armor. Then one morning, a FedEx envelope showed up. Sender, Dylan. I almost tossed it straight in the trash, but curiosity won. Inside was the diamond ring I'd once seen on Haley's hand, the very same one bought with my money. Tucked next to it was a check for $2,000, with a sloppy scribble, "I'm sorry." I didn't shed a tear. I took the ring to a jeweler, sold it, and used the cash to knock down part of my credit card debt. It felt like closing one last transaction with the devil, sign it off, shred the contract, and walk away lighter. As I slipped the crisp bills into my wallet, I thought to myself, "Thanks, Dylan. If it weren't for you, I might never have known I could laugh this loud." I moved into a new apartment, smaller but brighter and quieter than the old place that once held both Dylan and all his drama. To save money, I moved in with Riley. Honestly, living with a single mom who's been through real life is way easier than living with a startup founder who specialized in freeloading. Riley had rules. Split the bills, split the groceries, and split the laughter after every exhausting shift. Month by month, I chipped away at the debt Dylan left behind. My credit score, which had taken a nosedive like a roller coaster, slowly started climbing back up. Every time I paid off a chunk, I'd reward myself with one tiny cupcake. Just one. I didn't need a Princess Mary's startup guy ending. I just needed to know I could stand back up and buy myself a cupcake with money I'd actually earned. Dylan? He disappeared from the city. Rumor has it Haley dumped him after finding out he was running his creative financial management routine on multiple women. I didn't feel joy or regret, just calm, like finally uninstalling a junk app that kept spamming your screen with pop-up ads. Now, every morning in my new apartment, I look in the mirror and no longer see the panicked, sleepless girl who was drained by a freeloading man. I see a new version of myself, sharper, funnier, and crystal clear about my worth. I didn't lose a man. I shed a parasite, and I got myself back. Sometimes, the biggest loss is actually the gift of freedom. I once thought I'd collapsed because of a man, but really, I just cleared out the trash to make space for real happiness. The lesson? Never underestimate the power of blocking a phone number and opening a new savings account. What about you? Have you ever ended up feeding a parasite in the name of love? And how did you handle it? Politely showing them the door or tossing them straight into the dumpster? I can't wait to read your stories in the comments. Oh, and if you want more real-life twists that are equal parts drama and comedy, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Trust me, drama doesn't send calendar invites, but I will see you in the next video.